doing a podcast that I'm sure other podcasters could relate to is whenever you reach out to a creator or whatever type of podcast you do, you reach out to someone that you want to be a guest on the podcast, or maybe that person even reaches out to you to be on the podcast. And maybe, I know like myself and anybody that has been on my podcast can tell you that that's pretty much how things work, which is we talk about a date, we talk about a time, and once we both agree up on a date and time, I'm gonna go ahead and send you the invite. Whether that's a week, whether that's 2 weeks, however long, whatever we talk about, I'm gonna create the invite and I'm going to send it to you. Usually a day or two in advance before the episode. I usually reach out to that individual to confirm that they are going to be on the episode, on such and such a date. That individual usually says, yes, I'm going to be there. A lot of times they are, but there's a few times here and there where they say, yes, they are, and they don't actually show up. Now, a first impression is everything, meaning there are some artists, some music producers out there, they can hit me up anytime and say, or ask me rather, what do you have open? Hey, I got this coming out in such and such a date. I wanted to make sure that, I get the word out on it. I look up my dates, I shoot it to them, we agree, they show up. Those type of guests, no, they can always hit me up and I'm gonna get them on. But if you the type of guest, I had one individual, again, not gonna give any names out about who or, in fact, there was a lot of people, but this is one particular instance. And this happened, I want to say late 2023, maybe early 2024. But I had a producer who we tried to set up 4 times. And each of those times I did exactly as I described. We had talked about a date and we came up with a time to do the interview. And when that date came around, the first time didn't show up. Second time didn't show up. And me usually I'll give you 2 times. Maybe the first time an emergency happened and for whatever reason you couldn't show up. That is totally understandable. Maybe the second time around, well, if there is a second time around, I just ask that you hit me up to let me know if there is something going on. Cause I set up, I get ready to go. I spend time doing a little research, maybe listening to that music creators work, whatever they have on streaming platforms. If they have videos on YouTube, I like to also check out their social media to see what they have going on. When I have a guest on a Major Music Lounge podcast, I don't just say, I'm picking this random artist or that random artist. I actually go and I take a look at everything that this artist is doing. That way I make sure that I put in the work as a podcaster to learn about my guests and I am informed about the things that they are doing. That way, when they come on the podcast, that creator and myself can have a meaningful conversation and understand where each other is coming from. So it's not just like somebody comes on and on the fly, I'm thinking of all these questions that I'm going to ask. No, while I'm doing the research on this artist, I'm actually coming up with some of those questions that I want to ask on a podcast. And in addition to that, I may build some more questions around some of the responses that I get from that creator. So, some podcasters, they might operate that way where they just have somebody on, they don't do any research about that artist or that producer, and maybe they find a way to have some meaningful conversation. But I feel like, from my experience doing this as long as I have, I started this podcast in 2021, and um, over that whole time, I'm a fan of a lot of other like podcasters. I listen to a lot of like NBA podcasts, a lot of NFL podcasts. I listen to a lot of even like professional wrestling podcasts. Like shout out to Chris Van Vliet. But I take things that I hear, a lot of these other podcasters say in terms of how they prepare for guests that come onto their platform. And it's helped me grow and become a better podcaster myself. So, if I'm investing my time to learn about you, I think like, and I got another thing like from work, not the job that I work currently, but there was this job I used to work, and they used to say that you should prepare for as long as like you're going to be presenting. So I kind of took that into um the podcast and how I prepare. The podcast is usually about 30 minutes. We may go a little bit longer than that, depending on the guest that comes on. I've had some people I've had on for 45 minutes to an hour, but that's usually where we're kind of uncovering layers, and we're having a lot of deep discussion about some of the things that they're doing. So I say that to say I'm investing time into learning about my guests.